people, they're no longer living in the country because we've experienced under Obama the biggest number of deportations, bigger than any other president. So for a lot of people, it's changed in that they're no longer living in the United States at all. For other people, maybe on the different end of that spectrum, they've benefited from the Deferred Action Program, which was specifically created for youth who came to the United States with their parents, finished high school, and met sort of certain requirements in terms of, having a clean record, et cetera. So they were able to apply for DACA, as it's referred to. And they are sort of free from the threat of deportation for 2 years at a time. And so we're in sort of the second round of that right now. The young people have been able to sort of apply and get that. Not that there haven't been any glitches with that, but those are sort of the people who essentially can't get deported, but only in a temporary way. We don't know what's going to happen after the next presidential election with DACA and with DACA recipients. I mean, the working conditions have always been pretty rough for undocumented workers. You're sort of guaranteed this group of people that technically have rights, right? As workers, they have rights. Your immigration status as a civil status doesn't affect your ability to sort of garner those rights. But in effect, it does. Sort of living with the constant threat of deportation, employers know that they can get away with paying workers less of a wage. We know that Obamacare is seen as sort of wildly popular in the United States, but undocumented immigrants aren't eligible for it. And so they often have to incur sizable costs when it comes to healthcare because they have to pay out of pocket, either that or go, to the emergency room. And we've seen, some cases from time to time when the Department of Labor specifically addresses issues in which undocumented workers are specifically being exploited. But, I worked on a story earlier this year where you had a lot of employees from working in a large corporation called Waste Pro, which manages waste in Florida. And they were constantly bullied. They had to pay $1,000 just to be able to get the job. They weren't able to take time off if they were injured on the job, and some of them were, really heavy concussions, gashes to the face, sort of falling off of roofs, etc. They had to pay to come back to work after they took unpaid time off. So it's really, you have sort of this class of very unprotected workers. My colleague Julianne Hing and I were talking about this today. She's working on a great story, and the question, the way Julianne would frame it, I believe, is that she would say, there's a perennial question like, how are Latinos going to vote? Are Latinos mad at the Democrats because they didn't do anything about immigration, and so they're not going to vote, or are they going to put up with it? And I think what she found is, some of it isn't too surprising. Like, Latinos care about immigration. A lot of us are either immigrants ourselves or, have families that have immigrants, may have a mixed status families where some people are citizens, some people are residents, some people are undocumented, some people have DACA. So it's important, but, the issue of like education is sort of universally important. The issue of the economy, always universally important for all people that are voting, right? But then what you have, and what Julianne has sort of found, is that there isn't sort of this Latino monolith, especially at this moment. You have these states like California where you have a very sizable Latino population, and it's been there for a long time. You have Latino politicians going on second generation now, that are just like entrenched in California, Democratic politics. And then you have places like Georgia where it's a little different, and people are starting to sort of realize that they can flex their muscle, and they're really angry at sort of what's happening. And that's different than what's happening in Colorado, where people are starting to get engaged into the voting process in certain ways. But, that's a brand new blue state, for example. So it's hard to say really how the Latino vote specifically is going to impact sort of this immigration, this election rather through the lens of immigration. And that's precisely because we're talking about sort of really different populations from state to state, people who have interacted in different ways or not at all with some candidates, don't take the Latino vote seriously because they don't feel like they have to. That's increasingly going to change, but it's just not the same everywhere. California and Texas might be similar, but they're not going to be similar to many other states. So we don't know. I mean, I have my own opinions about what's going to happen with the Senate race, but I don't know that the Latino vote necessarily is going to play much into that. I will add, however, there is a group of mostly young people in North Carolina called North Carolina Dream Team, and they decided that they really didn't like their local senator, Kay Hagan, and so they started kind of like going door to door and having fundraisers, and they decided to design a gigantic billboard in sort of the center of a big town in North Carolina. And they have a huge ad calling Kay Hagan out, right? They're not saying to vote for the other candidate, but these are, largely undocumented youth and their families who paid for a billboard to denounce this Democratic candidate who is seen as having not done anything for immigrants in the time that she's been there and has really kind of stood against moving forward on immigration legislation. So again, it's interesting. North Carolina happens to be this place in which you have sort of all these youth who are like, you know what, we're just gonna get a billboard and we're gonna just shame her. So we'll see how that turns out. And it's hard to say, other than to say that it's different in every state. Yeah. So this is my opinion. I don't think that we're going to get comprehensive immigration reform until 2016. I've thought that for a really long time, and for years my opinion was very unpopular. But it never. I don't think that Republicans ever wanted to let Obama walk away with that legacy, and I think that Obama wanted to walk away with that legacy so badly that he instituted some of the most draconian immigration policies that we've ever seen. The amount of people that are in detention every single day, the fact that Congress has a mandate to fill 32,000 beds every night with undocumented immigrants. I mean, this is an anomaly in the United States, not in terms of incarceration, because the United States has always loved to incarcerate people. It's always been part of the state here. But in terms of immigration specifically, right, when you're talking about people who are not going through criminal proceedings, they're going through civil proceedings for their immigration status, which is a civil matter. And so it just is really wild sort of what's happened under Obama. And I think that he did that, wanting to sort of appear really tough on immigration and really kind of crack down ahead of trying to sort of poise himself as someone who could play with both sides and, come to this compromise. And I think that it was a bad gamble for him and his legacy, because I don't think that we're going to see comprehensive immigration reform until 2016. What we may see is what Obama promised earlier this year. He very clearly made a promise. It was he didn't mince words, and he said that he was going to, by the end of summer, he was going to have some kind of program. Now, is it going to be for all the estimated 11 million undocumented immigrants? Is it going to benefit all of them? No. We know that every piece of legislation that has to do with immigration always comes at valuing some people and sort of seeing them as deserving of some kind of status at the cost of sort of chipping away at these undeserving immigrants, right? So these definitions sort of change, like who's deserving and who's not deserving. Is it the student or is it the house cleaner? And like, how good are they to society, et cetera? And so all of these questions come up. For whatever Obama was going to do, there were different rumors. Maybe it would be people who came with a visa and overstayed their visa. Maybe it's people who are the parents of young people who have been able to obtain DACA. Maybe it's people who are related to those people. We don't know. We're not sure how many million people it's going to positively affect. What we do know is that summer came and went, and Obama decided not to move forward on it because he got scared by his own party that they would lose the Senate if he went ahead and sort of enacted this executive power, right, to again defer the deportation of some immigrants. And so now supposedly we're going to see that after the election. We may or may not see it. I doubt that it'll positively affect more than maybe a third of the people that are undocumented here. But, we're still not sure what it is. And I'd say it's a 50-50 as to whether he's going to, actually come through on his promise or not. We've seen that he's been unable to sort of really move on anything except for DACA. The only thing he's really kind of moved forward on is DACA in his whole time in office. I think that it depends who you ask. I'm going to sort of be as honest as possible and talk about the people that I've talked to over the years, and including recently. People will very candidly tell me over and over again through the years that they don't really care about citizenship. And that's kind of like a crazy thing to say, because a lot of activists, a lot of the, especially like Beltway kind of advocates, a lot of lawyers are like, we have to have citizenship. And, the United States really values citizenship as like core to this country. And there are historical reasons for that. There were people who never were eligible for citizenship, and we had to create an entire amendment for that. However, what does citizenship mean to some people? What did citizenship mean to Mike Brown, for example? He had citizenship. Was he really afforded all the rights of citizenship? Most people would say no, right? And so we know that even when someone is conferred citizenship, that doesn't always mean a whole lot. I think what's really important for undocumented immigrants, and again, this is, I think a lot of sort of more mainstream advocates and activists would sort of denounce me even talking about this. But I think that what a lot of people are looking for is a way to be able to cross back and forth on the border, and a way to sort of be able to more fully participate without the fear of constant fear of removal, right? So you're talking about people that really just want to be able to go home for a little while and then come back and be the labor that this country seems to want in a particular kind of worker, right? I think that that's what a lot of people would ask for. There's certainly, without a doubt, a lot of immigrants, undocumented immigrants, who would tell you that citizenship is very important to me. And I don't want to say that people don't think that. I mean, a lot of people do. A lot of young people do. It's very, very important to them. But I don't think that really captures what everyone is saying. No, and people have been asking for a moratorium on deportations since he's really ramped them up, right? George Bush kind of started a ramp up on deportations. We saw a really big change after 9/11, which shouldn't come as a surprise, but Obama just sort of took it full force, right? And a lot of people were saying okay, you want to wait on your announcement, just wait on deportations. We need time to figure everything out, wait on deportations. And he hasn't. Deportations, continue. It ebbs and flows, but it's a constant program. This sort of criminalization of this civil matter, putting people into detention, and then deporting them. I mean, it just continues on and on and on. And I don't think there's really. I don't know. I mean, there may be some end in sight depending on what he pronounces, if he ever does. Either next month after the election or in the next couple of years. I don't know, but I don't know that it's necessarily going to change this practice. There really sort of is this deportation machine. It keeps moving. It's an entire industry too. We do know that the private prison industry is heavily invested in housing immigrants. sometimes I think what gets lost in that too, though, is that the federal government also houses a lot of undocumented immigrants, which again is a little bit of an anomaly, you know? So it really is sort of like this state and corporate kind of partnership that's invested in detaining and removing certain kinds of people.